Thanks for joining us today. We're excited to welcome you to the AIA Colorado Committee on the Environment 2026 Summer Webinar Series, which will be a two-part programming exploring the critical topic of water. For those of you who are new to COTE, we're a community of architects and designers committed to advancing design that creates positive environmental and social outcomes across Colorado and beyond. This year, my colleague and I chose to center our programming on one of the most urgent and interconnected issues shaping our communities, ecosystems, and the built environment, which is water. To get us started today, before I start, I do want to mention this is the first of our series, so we'll also have a part two coming August 5th. It'll also be at noon, and that session will explore the practical realities of pursuing net zero water in Colorado, including water law, permitting, and infrastructure considerations for design teams. To get us started today, we'll briefly introduce ourselves, provide some context for today's conversation, and then introduce our panelists whose expertise and perspectives will guide today's discussion. I'm Alexis Campion, a Colorado Committee on the Environment member and an architectural designer with CCY in the Roaring Fork Valley.
Thanks, Alexis. Hey, everyone. My name is Francis Mounier, also a COTE member, and super excited that everyone is here today. It's a super important subject matter we're discussing. So Colorado is experiencing unprecedented pressure on its water future. We have rising temperatures, prolonged drought, declining snowpack, wildfire, and growing communities, right? So demands on a finite water supply. At the same time, in tandem with this, we have the legal and the political challenges surrounding water rights and the river basin and how water is allocated and then how it's managed and then how it's shared across the West. So water is becoming this design issue. It's a policy issue. It's a planning issue. And it's just a challenge for resilient communities today and going forward. So as we explore either technologies today or talk about infrastructure or policy, design strategies, we're looking to what can we do to better create communities that are resilient and adaptable for generations to come. So that being said, I think it's a great time for introductions. So I'll just kindly ask our panelists to introduce themselves, tell us a little bit about who you are and the work you do. And we'll just go ahead and start with you, Russ. Are you here?
Yes. Good.
Hey, Russ, there he is.
Good
Good to see you.
afternoon.
Go ahead, please.
Excellent. Hello, I'm Russ Slade. I work at Denver Water. I've been in the Denver Water Board now for 19 years. I did 10 years in the Water Rights Group and the last 9 in raw water supply. So daily operations of the whole collection system for raw water at Denver Water. I've had the pleasure of actually working with Lauren on a couple of projects here between One Water type ideas around the Colorado and the service area, and have a strong passion for everything water related.
Fantastic. Lauren, how about you?
Hi, everybody. I am Lauren McNeil. I'm a sustainability consultant with Group 14 Engineering here in Denver. I have had the pleasure of working on a number of projects that have been able to incorporate water reuse strategies, including projects with graywater reuse, wastewater treatment on site, the use of purple pipe, and even a project that was able to get rainwater capture permitted. So excited to have the conversation.
That's fantastic. Dr. Charvel, how about you?
Hi, I'm Sybil Charvel. I'm a professor at Colorado State University in the Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. My research really focuses on fit-for-purpose water systems and circular water systems, so making use of graywater, stormwater, rainwater, treated wastewater, all of the things for beneficial use, and treating those sources to the right level for the right use. I'm also technical director of the Water Technology Accelerator Platform Laboratory, where we're demonstrating a lot of technologies for on-site water systems and fit-for-purpose water.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Mike, lastly to you, please.
Well, thanks for leaving me to the end, Russ. I'm Mike Riggs. I'm a principal at RTA Architects. I've been dancing around sustainability circles for a little while, but really started to engage in water with my experience on top of Pikes Peak with the Summit Visitor Center, where we had some extreme water challenges and experience with attempting to permit an on-site water treatment system and reuse. So, looking forward to the discussion today. I think this panel's got a lot of very intelligent people on it, so I'm looking to learn a lot about this from this conversation as well as everyone else.
Wonderful.
Awesome. Yeah. So today's conversation is meant to encourage open dialogue between our panelists because they each have their own connection to the built environment and water. And our goal was to create an interdisciplinary discussion to connect ideas, uncover opportunities, and explore collaborative solutions. We're going to be asking directed questions to panelists. However, if you have something to add, please chime in. As for the audience members, thank you for participating in today's conversation, and we're going to reserve the last 15 minutes for questions. So please put your questions in the chat, and we'll address as many as possible during the Q&A portion at the end. Our first question will be for the group. As we've titled this event, Designing Within the Limits, can each of you define the limits considering the current state of water in Colorado and how it impacts your work? I think let's start with Lauren.
Yeah, hi. So I think we'll have a great conversation around what the true limits are in terms of what our Colorado water law kind of restricts and prohibits us from doing, and what those opportunities look like from a couple other panelists. But for me, I would just say that the limitations aren't as restrictive as many of us may think. There's things that we can be doing today, including graywater reuse, that we can and should be offering up to our clients. And I think one of the limitations that we kind of see is just gaps in knowledge. So having conversations with your AHJ and opening these discussions up with expertise locally really opens doors that you otherwise may think are closed to your projects. So I'll take a deeper dive there, but I think it'd be great to hear from Russ maybe on what is and isn't currently allowed.
Thank you for teeing me up. Water rights, right? Limiting factors in Colorado, right? So we have to make sure we are no longer probably in the state of Colorado thinking of as we grow or develop, right, that we can just tap into a new source of water. That I think we're past that. There is no new sources of water, right? Denver can't go to the Colorado River Basin and extract more water. It's probably not prudent to keep drilling more deep wells, right? To gap our supply gaps, as that's a finite source of water. So what should we be doing? We should be making our current water supplies, looking at whether we're reuse to make them more resilient through all the projects that we're a part of. And we need to have the planning community, the development community, and the water community all in that at the same level, whether that's at the very start of the project.
Mike or Sybil, do you want to comment on how you define the limits in your work?
Sure. Everyone's already mentioned water rights, and that, of course, is a limitation here in Colorado. But I do think, Lauren alluded to this earlier, I think the limitations aren't quite as much as people would think. And a lot of people, we have at our Spur campus a system that captures roof runoff and makes use of that for irrigation on site. And pretty large building there where we're doing that. So that's a commercial scale building, and we have had to do a water augmentation plan, and we report to our friends at Denver Water how much water we use, and then we pay for that water. But the point is that it's doable within our current legal confines. It could be easier with some modifications to policy and things, but it is doable, and water augmentation plans are doable, and gray water is legal, and even on-site wastewater systems can be legal within the current system. So I think that we need to focus a lot on what we can do within the current framework. And as projects start onboarding, I think that these things will only become more and more straightforward and allowable through the policy to be implemented. So there we do have some strives to get through to really make projects more simple and streamlined. But the more demonstration projects that can happen in the current framework, I think the faster things can move forward with some of those policy restrictions.
I wish I could add a lot to that, but you guys have filled in a lot of those blanks. I mean, the limitations really have been actively being redefined. I don't think we'd be having any of this conversation by 10 years ago, 10, 15 years ago. There wouldn't be any conversation around water in Colorado. It's been just tied up in the legalities of, the 1800s compacts. So we are in a pretty exciting time to be able to even have these opportunities. I do think it'd be great to have a little bit easier process through navigating all of the ins and outs. I know depending on your location, navigating an augmentation plan, if you're sitting in one drainage basin, it's a lot easier. If you're sitting in the top of 5 basins, it's much more difficult to try and track and augment. And augmentation is still it's a start to the process, but it is a limitation because we're not necessarily saving the water since we have to put that back. So
it's separate. One I could add to this
would be like
Well.
better, because then you're just showing 5 as the weird one.
Okay, so
Well,
my next question, we're going to kind of piggyback off what you're talking about here, Mike, and bring in Lauren to the conversation. Drawing on both of your guys' experience with the Living Building Challenge, what are the biggest barriers you're seeing to achieve the water pedal in Colorado, and how have those challenges influenced the way that you think architects and planners should approach water, not as an assumed utility, but more as a limited and carefully managed resource?
I think it's gotten better, but certainly how you document water and how you augment water is a challenge to that process. And where I alluded to kind of the drainage basin augmentation, just tracking that in Colorado can be, and how you quantify that and which agency you have to offset with and where you have to put that water back in is a challenge. One of the other things, how you balance net zero water when that capture is difficult is something that this living building challenge is still something to be navigated. But I think we're getting much closer in Colorado to be able to do that. It's been great, the experience of being able to work through the health department and through the water board to do reuse, and they've opened that up through Reg 84, which is fantastic, and Denver Water completing their process of actually treating on site and having that available for reuse. That is tremendous. I think we should be hopefully doing more of that in the future. One of the things that I'd say that the challenge of how we've looked at moving forward is, that limitation of water, and as Russ alluded to, is not just what our aquifer has, what our water rights are, but looking at our sites a little bit differently of what is the net, calculating what net rainfall we can have on our sites so we can actually calculate capture appropriately. And maybe that's a way that we can redefine how we use and treat and allocate our water within our buildings.
Yeah, something I would add is with the rising cost of water, it's outpacing the cost or the increase that we're seeing in inflation. So I think it's just time that we start looking at payback solutions for water in the same way we do for energy. And I think oftentimes our projects kind of eliminate creative water strategies fairly early on based on first cost or concerns of maintenance or worry that they're going to be the first one to go. So I think just having some of these precedent projects that we can point to and say, look, there's a success story here. Look, this technology is being explored, like Sybil was sharing about the hydro building at National Western. Just having added information we can all point to. And then I think we all just need to be a bit more curious, having questions around this fit for purpose water idea. What level of treatment does this water need? Do we need potable water to flush our toilets? No. And then I think just having conversations again with your AHJ to say, is there easy solutions? Like, is there purple pipe nearby me? Is the owner maybe interested in dual plumbing for future-proofing their building, even in the absence of a current system, but knowing that this is where the industry is headed and that water restrictions are probably not going away anytime soon. So I think just, yeah, having a little bit more intentionality early in design, so that those conversations aren't so quick to pass by.
That's fantastic. Thank you guys so much. So this next question is for Dr. Charvel and Mike, but just hearing everyone speak, we're just going to open up to the panel. But so throughout the course of the year, since Alexis and I have been working together on water, we've had several conversations, and a topic that keeps coming up is awareness or being conscious of water. Every drop, where is it coming from? Where is it going? So on and so forth. So case in point, it drives me bananas. I think we've all seen it. The broken sprinkler head that's doing a better job watering the street and the sidewalk versus the yard. And then something as everyday and simple as brushing one's teeth for 2 minutes with the faucet running. I know these are simple softball sort of answers, if you will, or comments, but they're super important. So I'll ask the team when it comes to designing the site, designing the building, and actually designing the user experience at the source of water. Is there anything that we can start to be thinking about to just let's raise awareness, let's realize how valuable water really is to everyone everywhere. But Dr. Charvel, if you could please start.
Sure, thanks. And I mean, I think these things have to happen in everywhere from like the home to our office spaces. I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind though is rain barrels and rainwater catchment and roof runoff catchment. Though having people implement projects like that where they're catching the runoff from their roof and using it in their yard, sometimes those don't actually make a whole lot of impact actually in the whole water balance. But what they really do is create community awareness and let people understand like that rain event just filled this and now this barrel and now this barrel is just irrigating this little portion of grass here. So having more projects, I think, where people are involved with their water and catching it or, capturing it, whatever water source it may be, and using it and understanding how much water it really takes to do various activities, I think is a huge part of the process. I also think that in our public spaces, having demonstration projects with signage and things like that, like we have at our CSU Spur campus, where a lot of kids and people of all ages come and learn about all of the projects that we're doing. I think that helps to create some awareness, but I think there's nothing like when you yourself catch water and then use it and understand kind of that connection between how far the water that you collect actually goes, to be cautious about all of these things.
Great. Mike, you want to chime in?
Well, I think there's several things that, we need to be looking into the future of what, we know that there's going to be a lot less water in the future. And even though we may not be able to implement or convince our clients to do rainwater capture or implement a treatment system now, there's certain subtle things architecturally that we should maybe assist them in the future. We can program in some extra space to accommodate some storage, maybe in the basement of their facility, or do things just shaping roof runoff to a common location, whether that's common roof downspouts, leaders, roof slope, to kind of take advantage of that collection point in the future, and kind of expand upon the way we've thought about bioswales and storm drainage. We've done those for a while. LEED kind of instigated some of that in terms of stormwater design, decades ago, but that's going to be untapped in the future. We're going to need to source that water and not just let it run off. And as soon as more of these test projects and we get more documentation, the legality of that is going to change. And if we set up our buildings now for that, we can leverage that in the future.
Nice.
Awesome. I'm going to kind of shift the conversation towards long-term planning. So this question is for Russ. With our statewide rising temperatures, snow drought, and heightened wildfire risks we're seeing this year specifically, how exactly has drought and wildfire changed the long-term water supply planning, either at Denver Water or even sharing a little bit about your partnership program with the Forest Service?
Yep, all great. So I will try not to be too doomsday because 2026 is reshaping everything we thought we knew. Okay. So the question becomes, drought, resiliency, wildfires, how that all impacts, right, with a changing climate that we see across Colorado. So it becomes, if we take on drought first, right? So we thought we were getting pretty smart after the 2002 drought, right, which was the current sort of in recent history the worst we've done on record, right, where Denver Water went from, we didn't have metered billing. We implemented a tiered rate structure. So if you were using water, even though we're asking you to use less, we'd charge you more, right? Or other sort of things that came out of that was a conservation program. Hey, let's not water between 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. and let's only water 3 days a week. And that's the foundation, right? And then if it's a wet year, great. If it's a dry year, we're going to start ratcheting you back from there. Things like the recycling plant for Denver Water, right? Hey, rather than that water that comes out of the metro wastewater stream and goes downriver, let's plumb into that and pump that back to uses around the city that don't require drinking water for those uses, whether it's a power plant or an irrigated area, let's say, or other industrial uses. Where the rub comes for Denver Water is the system we've built is the collection system all falls to us from the mountains to the city via gravity. So it costs nothing to get the water to us. A recycle plant is at the bottom of the system, at the bottom of the city, and it all needs pumping back, right? So now that water has to be the price of that water has to be adjusted so that actually people want to get onto that system, right? Because actually it's more expensive for us to provide that water because it's not via gravity. And then other development projects where you look at saying, all right, from a resiliency standpoint, if you can't, all the water that's coming out the bottom of the city from a wastewater treatment plant, how do you make more use of that? So can we recapture it in downstream gravel pits and try and bring that back up to our service area later on when we do have a good water year? In terms of the long-term planning of aspects, so you say, right, how are we gonna, you've got this one set bucket of water, right? You say reliable yield for Denver Water. We typically deliver nearly 250,000 acre feet per year on average over the last 10 years, right? That's quite a lot of water. For example, today the city is drinking 400 CFS of water or more, right? There's less than 5 CFS. There's 0 CFS below Chatfield Reservoir in the city of Denver right now. So we're drinking way more water than Mother Nature's providing, right? So how do you guard yourself long term? It's a little bit like bank savings, I would say, is that, if you lose your job, how long are you going to be able to pay your bills for with your savings account, right? So Denver Water has 4 years worth of supply. So you got to make that 4 years last as long as you can. If you hope 2026 is a one-off event, or is it going to be a start of a multi-year event, right? So then the only lever you got left is to reduce your treated water demands, right? Ask people to irrigate less. And then you get into no irrigation. Can you protect the trees to protect canopy for urban heat island type impacts? And after that, you start having to ration indoor uses, and you hope that people understand that, right? My fear is that in Colorado, we've had such a big growth, and 2002 was the last hard time we went through, that maybe we're not all tuned into the realities of living here in the West. And 2026 is going to reframe that. So what are we doing to make sure we're trying to plan for those long-term futures? It could be we have machine learning models trying to help predict whether that's weather events and how that impacts the streams. Real-time, right? Satellite imagery, or we call it ASO, Airborne Snow Observatory, taking real-time LiDAR images of the snowpack. So we have better modeling going into our reservoirs for runoff season to better plan for these types of years. How does wildfire work into that? Well, obviously, drought and wildfire are absolutely linked, right? And then, unfortunately, after the drought, it always becomes the big storm. We're seeing that on the West Slope right now, right? We're having landslides due to heavy rains off of either parched soils or burned scars. That creates drinking water problems. We've only got one instance at Denver Water back after the Buffalo Creek fire in 1996, where the flow of soil and sediment was so great off that burn scar that we actually had to turn off our major water treatment plant for just one day while we could not physically treat that water. So those realities are more and more, right? That we could see in the future where the residents or the ratepayers of Denver water system are used to be quite frank, drinking snowmelt from Dillon and Cheeseman Reservoir, right? And that water quality is pristine and beautiful. But going forward, it might not be that good if we're having to reuse more water. We're competing with algal toxel blooms. We've seen them all the way up at 11 Mile last year, which is somewhat scary. That's above 9,000 feet. We're finding algae grow in the summer, which we're used to seeing down in the city, water bodies, but not up in the mountains. So now it's throughout the whole system. So water quality goes down. That means we should preserve the best water for drinking water, make sure we're using that one water philosophy to extend that drinking water and making use of any non-potable sources as much as we can throughout the city. So wildfires, yeah, we've seen some big and bad ones. Unfortunately, we seem to be becoming more of a problem out west. And we need to make sure we are engaging in programs. So Denver Water has we call it Forest to Faucets with the US Forest Service. So what we do is we co-share funding with the Forest Service to make sure we're doing the correct watershed treatments that the Forest Service would recommend in the watersheds or the catchment areas around our reservoirs. So whether that's the thinning of forests, sediment traps, other, trapments within the drainages to make sure that we're sort of holding up silt and sediment that may be running off from burn scars such as Hayman as well as Buffalo Creek, to make sure we're protecting that drinking water quality and keeping it the best that we can for as long as we can. And these are things that we shouldn't be just doing in isolation as Denver Water with the Forest Service, but that should just be a statewide thing, right? Because otherwise we're only treating certain forests to better standards than other parts of the watershed. But these are long-term things where Denver Water's been engaged in that for 20 plus years now. And if you take the example that if there's no more supply or use whatever your feelings are on gross reservoir, if you say that to bring on a new increment of supply to a service area, that was a 20-year permitting exercise plus a 10-year capital project expenditure. So your planning horizons are over 30 years to meet a new demand, right? Or increase resiliency of your system. So you've got to have such long-term thinking now, and with climate change, it's becoming more and more difficult. So I've spoken a lot there. Is there anything I need to circle back on here that I should make a final point on?
I think that was great.
Yeah, thank you.
Kind of continuing this conversation around the development pressures for Colorado. Something that we wanted to bring into dialogue was the expansion and development of AI data centers and how this has brought increased attention to the significant resource demands of these facilities. Anyone can chime in here, but what are the concerns or challenges that you're noticing around the water consumption, and how should communities evaluate these projects in the context of long-term water security? Go ahead, Russ.
I'll jump in here if nobody else wants to jump in before me. Okay, all right. I'll take the lead. Okay, so data centers, right? So if you're a customer in the Denver Water service area, whatever the customer is, you're obviously Denver Water is obliged to serve you, right? So that's why we keep a certain amount of water in storage to be able to do that. Fortunately for Denver, the city is essentially, other than the sort of the arm going out towards DIA, right? It's already in a developed urban environment, so you're probably just transferring one demand to another. And to be quite frank, I don't know, a data center that maybe uses 10,000 gallons per day uses way less water than a golf course does, to be quite frank, or a park, right? In the grand scheme of things, so it's not such a big issue for Denver Water per se in a again largely urbanized, already built out environment that has most square feet already having a demand upon it. Now, what should we do? Should we look at what we call SDCs, system development charges? So that's the the fee you pay to plug into the already existing system that everybody else has already paid for. If you're going to be a super large demand on that system, should you pay more to come online, right? Because you're going to be a bigger burden. If, like years like this in 2026, where we are asking all customers to reduce by 20%, right? So whether that's your residents going down to 2 days a week watering, or we say to a park and golf course, hey, we're not going to tell you how to irrigate your park or golf course. You know that better than us, but cut 20% this year, whatever that, however you want to do that, right? How would you do that with a data center or a large power plant, for example, when maybe there's some backbone of the the whole urban area that relies on those services? I think those are interesting questions to get into. Then should they pay more for that with that? So right now, obviously, for the city and county of Denver, there's a moratorium on data centers while the mayor looks at creating a task force to fully understand the resources required to support that. I'm not sure, although other states in the West seem to be quite open to having these be a demand on their system. Not sure that's where they should be, quite frank. We've got bigger problems than then adding more demand to reservoirs which are dropping in the West, right? So I think it should be looked at legally. You know, if you're a customer in a service area, we're obliged to serve you water. You just got to weigh that up with how you manage that whole portfolio of water that you would have each year.
Fantastic. So, all right, you guys, time check. It's 12:30. We're going to try to, well, we're going to call this a very loose lightning round, if you will, but we have some other questions you want to get to, and then we'll take Q&A from the audience in the chat. So please add your questions to the chat. So, Dr. Charvel, this one for you, please. Your doctoral work included development of a system for the treatment of graywater for potable reuse during space missions, right? So clearly a closed loop system, fresh water just is not present. So is there anything in your research then, and is there anything in your research today that can be looked at and considered for the built environment?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I think that that constraint is of, thinking about a space mission and you don't have external, or if you bring external water, it can't be very much. And even if you lose 1% per day of your water source, then over 100 days you're gone. You're done, right? So it's, if it puts a constraint onto the system that really created, I think, some innovation at that time in how we thought about circular water systems and being able to use water for different sources. And, at that time, even, so I did that work in the late 90s to early 2000s. And at that time, when I even spoke about using gray water to flush a toilet, there was a lot of resistance to that concept in that time. People have really come around, I think, to how we use water and accepting that not all water needs to be potable water for the uses. But in that time, I think that put a constraint where we were thinking about using gray water for potable water. And now we're in a day and age where we have the treatment technology to treat any water source of any very poor quality, honestly, to potable quality and even higher. So I think that there's just been a lot of advancements in treatment technology and the efficiency of those. But I think that from that time, thinking about that constraint of supporting a human space mission, um, we're not that far away with the state currently of the Colorado River. I think we've been talking today about this particular year is looking, it's very bleak in terms of, kind of how we can look at our water portfolio and everything. I think that as we start to move into the future, we really need to think about things in this kind of circular perspective. And I think that I'd say there's not like one technical innovation, but I think that concept of circular water systems and using local water and using that in the best ways possible and minimizing the import of water from other watersheds, for example, and then the export of our local water and keeping our local water sources. I think that concept is the best thing that came out of that work that happened in those days for NASA and long-term space missions. And I think that, getting us to think in that way now, and we're really close to where we kind of have to, is just the direction we need to be in.
Wonderful. Thank you for that. So we've just got a couple more questions for our panelists. Lauren, we have one for you, and then Mike will then end with you, and then we'll go to our Q&A. So Alexis, if you can, please.
Yeah. So kind of what Sybil was just mentioning with the circular systems, Lauren, I know you've done a lot of work with similar systems on projects throughout Colorado. So based on that experience, what's one idea about water that you think will become standard practice over the next 20 years?
I think even before the next 20 years, what we should be trending towards right now is looking at water intensities for building types and doing water balance calculations for our clients to help explain how much water they could be saving with the rules and regulations we're already allowed to adhere to. But in 20 years, I'd hope we're not using potable water to meet the water demands of our building in terms of flushing our water closets or meeting our irrigation demand. And that's something we can even be doing now.
Fantastic. All right, Mike. So kind of pivoting off the Pikes Peak Summit complex and the experience that you had and your firm had from that one project or any projects, designing within that constraint, how has that changed the practice of architecture at RTA, please?
I'll keep it a little bit short. I know we're getting tight on time, but I'm going to say, one, there's lots of challenges going from, thinking about water as limitless to having no source of water. But really what it's changed is really focusing beyond architecture to the science, the building science side of things, really trying to understand those complexities, but also a focus on advocacy, because we can dream up anything as architects and try and navigate, but we can't get anything done without trying to advocate and change those policies. So I'd say that's the biggest change in how we've approached, is really just, advocating for ourselves and looking at data points to help build that advocacy. Sorry.
No, that's fantastic. Great answer. We did have some other questions, you guys, but Nick, well, first of all, let me introduce Nick Remus, everyone. He's the Advocacy Engagement Director on staff at AIA Colorado. I'm sure you've seen him many times. Also a COTE member, and he's, moderating our webinar today. Nick, how are the questions looking? Do you think we have plenty to take us through to the end of the hour?
I've got 3 questions so far.
Okay, well, why don't we just do a quick lightning round for the group for about a minute and a half. Here's a good one. What gives you optimism about Colorado's ability to adapt? And Lauren, you go first.
The brilliant people on this call and all of you listening in and getting educated.
Fantastic. Mike.
Colorado has demonstrated a lot of leadership in being able to flexibly change antiquated laws, and I think that's just showing that as a strength. We know there's a good future ahead of our willingness to adapt.
Super. All right, Dr. Charvel.
Colorado has a culture of innovation, I think, and then coupled with a deep care for the environment and our ecosystems and preserving those. And I think that coupling of innovation with a care for the environment gives us a real opportunity to make change here.
Wonderful. Russ, to you, please.
Yep, thank you. I'll leave a couple points. So I would say that, again, I think Colorado has a history of tackling problems such as this and coming together. So whether that's ag communities and municipal, recreation, environmental, I think we all pull in the same direction when we need to. Looking at what happened in 2002, it took us 20 years to build back into those demands from the lessons we learned. How good can we be after 2026? And then the next one, right? I think we only ever walk forward and we get better at what we do.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I think we can just open it up to our audience now. Nick, I always find you have great questions as well. So is there anything now after our conversation that you would like to ask our panelists?
The one thing that I'm thinking about is we understand today what the lay of the land looks like. What do we do for the projects we've already completed if our clients are coming back to us saying, am I going to be in trouble? Do I need to make changes to my building or my site that I didn't plan around? Any suggestions on how to navigate those conversations? What kind of pointers can we give to clients to be on the lookout for? What do we do about those projects that are already complete and just kind of have to live with the decisions that were made, or maybe don't have to stick with those for all time?
I can take a swing. I'd say I think similar to things like Energize Denver and Colorado building performance standards, existing buildings do play a role, and hopefully there are avenues where we're all held accountable down the line. I think that we would want to scale those policies accordingly, since it is much more costly to retrofit things. But there are certainly strategies on the table, and perhaps they can even result in saving water, just like we could be saving energy.
Yeah, I mean, there are retrofits that are feasible, right? So, rainwater harvesting is, I think, an example of one that's pretty readily implemented as a retrofit. Single residences can do laundry to landscape graywater systems that don't require plugging into any plumbing, and the laundry machine is really the largest user of water in the home, so it generates substantial gray water. Adding the other sources doesn't add that much to it. So just capturing laundry water at a single residence. Those commercial buildings, though, they can be thinking about other retrofits they can do with water efficient fixtures and also roof harvesting, for example.
Yeah, and I would just add on to that. I'd work with whatever your local water provider is and say, hey, if we're able to look at projects to reduce, whether it's a site, a project site, an individual building's water footprint, see if there's ways to get a break on the or a rebate, whether that's on the SDC, the system development charge, or on the rates of which you're charged per 1,000 gallons or by month or however it works out, because you're showing that you can be helping the overall water picture for a service area.
Well, that perfectly transitions into the first question in chat, which was, what incentives does Colorado have to that help sell sustainable water additions on projects to clients? Tax breaks, grants, return on investment? I'm not aware of anything at the state level, but I know a lot of local jurisdictions, including Denver Water, have opportunities. Anything else out there of note? I put a couple links to Denver Water's programs in chat already.
The only other one I can think of that wouldn't be, a straight rebate would be if you were developing a greenfield site. I believe there's a program through the CWCB that Sterling Ranch were able to take advantage of when they started the creation of the neighborhood there, which was actually where you would normally need a water right to offset recapture of rain. But if you're taking a greenfield site to develop it into a project, there's a CWCB program to where you then do not need an augmentation plan or a water right to offset any rain that you intercept, which could be a benefit to some new projects on new sites.
And just to clarify, that's the Colorado Water Conservation Board?
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you.
I put a link to them in chat. So yeah, that's an interesting aspect too of where do you get the water if you're not even tying into a municipal system and you have to deal with the rights on a project by project basis? That's a whole other world.
And real quick, let me just chime in. We're at our August webinar. We do have someone from that Sterling Ranch project that will be speaking.
All right. Another question is, with agriculture accounting for 80 to 90% of Colorado's water use overall, what efforts are in place to be more efficient with agricultural water or to reuse it? Is there anything we can leverage to kind of make that go farther from a bigger community standpoint?
I'll try and do this as quickly as I can. It's difficult because of water rights. So what I would say is that farmers will try to use only the water that they're entitled to out the river and put it to the best use, right? Because they're paying for it as well, and their water rights are only worth so much. The problem is that water rights say that you only get X or Y, and then if the farmer wants to preserve the value of that water right, they're not incentivized to then save water, right? Because the water right is tied to how much water you divert. So a better plan would be, can the state come up with an idea where a farmer's not dinged in their water rights valuation if they, switch from, let's say, flood irrigation to whatever the most efficient way of irrigating is on their farm. The problem is if it's one headgate that then serves 100 farms, all 100 farms need to be doing that, right? Not just one farmer, because you've got this tied system where the irrigation runoff from one farm goes to the next farm and to the next farm and to the next farm. So you've got to think of this as whole scale for agricultural community.
And full disclosure, AIA Colorado tends to stay the heck away from legal water issues at the state capitol, as active as we are, as we try to be for issues concerning the built environment. Water law is so convoluted and tricky and has a lot of big players that are smarter than us that just want buildings to use less about like all the ins and outs. So I can tell you when I review the bills that are proposed, it's tricky to make anything happen, even at the state legislative level. And a lot of effort has to go into that. And a lot of stakeholders have to be consulted. And you have to play all these things through, like your comment about how many farmers might be on a shared system. So there are layers upon layers of water law challenges for any of these kind of big picture efforts to change how we do things across the state.
Yeah, unfortunately, I would liken it to you're standing on the tracks of a train line, and the train's coming towards you. At what point are you going to get off the tracks, right? So, how quickly can humans rewrite the words we've done for the last 100 years?
And those words have a lot of legal standing, and everyone involved wants to preserve their share. Like everyone fights fiercely to preserve their rights. No one wants to give anything up they don't have to, because that can be a life-altering change, and they don't want to accidentally step into something that they don't have their head wrapped around. So it's tough. Russell, another one that was targeted at you, thinking about water consciousness at the watershed scale, how do local folks understand their water resources? Can we see where our water comes from when it's pumped through a mountain? This is from someone who practices in Arizona, where transported water is very top of mind for big chunks of the state. How do we build that connection between what comes out of our faucets and where it comes from and how it actually gets there?
No, yes, fantastic question. I would rather hope we need to start this at the early school phase, right? Would be to have programs where I know Denver Water has one staff member going around city and county of Denver schools, right? Saying, that drop of water you came out, that came as far as Dillon Reservoir in a 23-mile tunnel under the Continental Divide. So it's very important you preserve it. Or, how far away Cheeseman Reservoir is or Gross Reservoir is to be able to bring all that water to the city, right? There is resources on, for example, like denverwater.org, right? Know your water. There's a story of how the water gets here. There's reports every day. This is how much water came down the Roberts Tunnel. This is how much water was delivered from Cheeseman, for example. So you can see if the water below Chatfield is 0 and we're drinking 400 CFS a day, this is how we're keeping that 400 CFS going. And you can see those reservoir levels dropping, our savings accounts, right, to meet those demands. So any resident, I imagine you can go on, whether it's Aurora Water's website, to see every day your statistics for your water. I would highly advertise if you were to search on denverwater.org for what we call the Water Watch. There's a daily PDF that goes out that gives you all the statistics from daily demands, whether they're higher or lower than expected, precip, cumulative snow, where the collection system is and where the demands are. So it's really lightning that you can see when it rains, demand goes down, which is fantastic customer behavior, right? Whether that's via automated sprinklers or manually resetting sprinklers to say it rained, I'm turning mine off, right? We see that in real time, which is excellent behavior. So you can look at all that. Look at the Water Watch. I imagine other agencies do this as well, but that really ties that connection between how we're performing day to day.
One other thing I'll add is that reading, there's been a lot of great articles from different news sites this year, given the droughts across the state. So like Colorado Sun has had some good series, Denver Post, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of good reporting being done right now on the kind of changes that are having to be made, whether it's the water restrictions. I was just reading that move water from one reservoir to another to protect that reservoir. I think it was Denver. So there's all these like minutia that if you keep your eye on the news, there's some interesting things that people can pick up on like how are people adapting real time to the drought that we're facing, and trying to figure out like, is this going to be the new normal, or are we just trying to get through a rough patch, and how do we figure out what the best moves are today without knowing a whole lot about the future.
Yeah, I'll also make a plug for, again, on denverwater.org. We call it TAP stories, TAP. You can search for those, and those are hot topic conversations and news stories around the state of Colorado related to water.
Last question I have in chat is Dennis says, another one came in, so let me scroll back up. My understanding of current law is that a local AHJ outside Denver has to adopt the use of graywater in their jurisdiction. How is AIA in the state working to encourage the smaller AHJs to allow water reuse? I will say that this has not been a pressing topic that we've seen within AIA Colorado, but if there are members that are running into challenges using graywater, please reach out to me after this webinar. I'd love to hear more about your story and see what kind of opportunities might exist. We're a home rule state, so in a lot of cases, a local government does have to act, but the state has gotten much more sophisticated in recent years in figuring out how to clear dams at the local level to kind of get some big ideas passed that apply to, if not statewide, much bigger parts of the state. So if graywater is something, being allowed is something that folks are running into challenges implementing, let me know. I'd love to learn more about that. One other one, what advice can you offer architects and builders to state of clients to encourage dual plumb systems when the principal cost is high and the ROI is difficult to justify right now?
It's the right thing to do.
How much are water prices up in the next decade? Are there resources to help architects kind of figure out like what the ROI might turn in, how that might shift over the course of the life of the building? Because that would be a great resource for us. And I don't know if historical norms would really cut it, or if we're all just kind of trying to find a crystal ball that might tell us where to look in the future.
I don't know if Russ, you have a sense for that, where water prices are headed.
And of course, that's a hyper-local issue too, because every jurisdiction has to clamor for their water. They're affected different ways in different drought conditions, and what may work for one city just might not work elsewhere. So I suppose that's not an easy challenge to figure out right now.
Yeah, I think I would just do your best to show the math of what that dual plumbed system can help you avoid in terms of water use on an annual basis and what the cost might be, and show that we anticipate it only escalating and that it offers kind of this resiliency strategy, especially if we're facing water shortages, that it might actually mean that they can maintain the operations of their building in a different way than otherwise forecasted.
Yeah, I'd add to that, Lauren, that for example, like the purple pipe system in Denver, right? That is not under restriction right now because people continue to flush toilets and wash dishes and clothes and stuff. So that recycled water is still returning every day. And as long as you're a part of that system, you still get to use all your water. So maybe there's some incentive to think about dual plumb building for resiliency standpoint, right? For the non-potable uses.
All right, we have 4 minutes left. Any final questions for today?
And if any of our panelists want to add a last bit of anything to the conversation, we welcome it. But I'll just start real quick. Thank you so much, everybody on the call, all the panelists. If you're here, it really means you care about something and you recognize a very, very important issue in our state, but let's even say globally. So thank you, everyone.
Yeah, I would just like to add, I mean, in terms of going forward and bigger Colorado River scale for the southwest of America, if we continue down the track to it going, the worst example of this is that if Denver, for example, meets 50% of its annual demand via importations from the Colorado River, if that was to go away, the front range would have to change dramatically to absorb that loss of supply, right? Half of our supply on an average annual basis. So please keep in mind what those big picture things coming along, because we can't continue to supply water in the same way if those conversations go bad.
All right. Well, with that, thanks again for everyone that was able to join us, and we will get to work on reporting attendance to National for continuing education credits, and we hope to see you at our next webinar.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.